Hello and welcome to the Operators Association podcast. This is Greg, the new Director of Athletics. I'm excited to be doing my first solo podcast today. This episode will be the first in a 6-part series that takes you from my childhood all the way through my journey of becoming a Navy SEAL. After this 6-part series, I will continue putting out bi-weekly podcasts on topics you guys are interested in hearing about in my role as the Director of Athletics. So those podcasts will be a great opportunity for us to deep dive any of your questions, physical or mental, on training and preparing for your selection courses. Back to this 6-part series, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what I'm going to cover in each of the episodes. Today I'm going to give you an overview from childhood through high school, college, and all the way up to my time going through officer candidate school. Episode 2 is going to be all about first phase. It'll be about first checking into buds, PTRR, and INDOC, and it'll be about first phase, the first 3 weeks of first phase up until Hell Week. The third episode is going to be about Hell Week, and then the remaining 3 weeks of first phase after Hell Week. The fourth episode will cover second and third phase of buds. The fifth episode is going to cover SQT, or SEAL qualification training, and all of the training blocks that entails. Finally, the sixth and final episode will be graduation from SQT, checking into a SEAL team, and an overview of the workup cycle, working towards your first deployment. Getting back to episode 1, we're going to dive into my childhood, high school experience, college, playing sports, my decision to join the military, breaking that news to my parents, their reaction, my decision to become an officer versus enlisted, the application process with my recruiter, physical training and preparation for buds, and finally leaving and going to OCS. So here we go. I grew up in northern New Jersey. In my childhood, I wasn't into traditional formal sports that much. I was really into BMX biking. I was into snowboarding, wakeboarding, hiking, being out in the woods, doing stupid things with my friends out in the woods, lighting off fireworks. But I always knew when I was young, I probably started to realize this around middle school, that I was drawn to hard work. I really remember, I have this vivid memory of snowboarding. And my best friend's older brother at the time told me, "You spend way more time building jumps than you do hitting them." And when he said that, I knew it was completely true. For whatever reason, I was always drawn to achieving or obtaining rare things. I guess you could call it delaying gratification. I was really into delaying gratification as a kid. Sounds kind of weird, but if there was something really hard to obtain, I just always looked at things like, what if I could do that rare thing that people talk about or dream about but never really go out and do? So back to my backyard snowboarding example, right? Kids would go out and build a jump in 20 minutes, and then they would spend 3 hours going off their little, foot-high jump. And I would get my shovel and I would build a jump for 5-6 hours, right? I would pile it up and carry snow from across the hill and make this thing absolutely massive, right? And then sculpt it and make it the right shape. And it might take 2 days for me to build it before I ever go off the thing. And then I would probably take an hour psyching myself up to go off it because it was, because I was terrified of it. But I wanted to make the biggest jump. I wanted to make the best jump, right? I wanted to make the best trails in the woods, the best dirt trails for our BMX bikes. There was something that always appealed to me about working really hard to create something great in the end rather than creating something mediocre. That may be from my parents, maybe from my dad, something that he instilled in me. Maybe it's genetic. It seems unlikely. Who knows? But I've always had that about me. And again, it was probably in middle school when I started to realize for the first time, maybe everyone doesn't feel this way. Maybe everyone doesn't do this. Like, everyone doesn't seem to work this hard. I started to sense, I actually remember exactly where I was in my neighborhood when I thought this for the first time. Maybe I'm a little different from most people, right? And maybe everybody thinks that. Maybe I'm not any different from most people to this day, but whatever. It seems to be a useful mindset to have as long as it's paired appropriately with humility. So when I got to high school is when I really began to love traditional sports. I played football and lacrosse, and I was unfortunate to go to an incredible high school for those two sports. It was an incredible academic high school for a public school, and also for football and lacrosse. It was the best place I could have been. My sophomore year, won a state championship in lacrosse, then went back-to-back, repeated as state champions in lacrosse as a junior. My senior year, we didn't win in lacrosse, but we won a state championship in football. So won 3 state championships in 3 years of varsity sports. It was pretty good, right? I could not have asked for a better high school experience than that. Had 2 of the best coaches, if not the 2 best coaches in the country. And I'm not saying that metaphorically, quite literally. They're incredible. And that delaying of gratification, that enjoying building the jumps more than going off them, really continued into sports, right? I loved training for sports. I worked out very hard in high school. It was a mild obsession. I was always focused on what I could do to become bigger, faster, stronger, better at my given sport. And I had absolutely zero interest in drugs, alcohol, anything that was going to deter me from my goals. And I honestly, at the time, I could not understand why anyone would want to surrender their mental and physical faculties, essentially, to alcohol. A similar theme along those lines of not wanting to drink, my whole life I was very survivalist oriented. I was really big into evolution. I was big into natural selection, and I wouldn't even go out in public in flip-flops for a while, right? I always wanted to have sneakers on. I always wanted to be ready to react to any given situation. And I can remember as far back as elementary school, I remember sitting in class in 5th grade and so I was in 5th grade when 9/11 happened, right? And I could remember sitting in my 5th grade classroom and daydreaming about Al-Qaeda coming to my elementary school and taking over the school and taking the principal hostage. And I had this vision where I don't know if I should even be telling this story, but you're going to lock me up. But in 5th grade, I remember having this vision where when Al-Qaeda came and took over a school, I went and broke the blade off of the paper cutter machine, right, and went out. There was a sentry posted in the hallway near the bathroom and slit his throat with the paper cutter, took his AK or sniper rifle, whatever he had in my dream back then, went into the boys' bathroom because there were 2 walls that were about, a couple feet apart where I could stretch out my arms and legs and touch either one and kind of shimmy my way up the wall. There were ceiling tiles in the bathroom. So my vision, I had his gun slung. I shimmied up this wall that I could climb, pushed out the ceiling tile, crawled through the vent into our gymnasium, where I'm sure it was Osama bin Laden was holding a gun to our principal's head. And I crawl up to the vent and shoot Osama bin Laden in the head. Right. Probably never told anyone that before. Now you're hearing it on a podcast. But that's just an example from a very young age that I was, I guess, survivally oriented, right? All through college, I remember always being hyper aware of my surroundings, of where I was sitting. I was always able to see the entrances and exits of buildings I was in, of restaurants. I always had a plan for people coming in and out. It was just something that I never researched or learned about. It just seemed natural to me. So that was me through high school. After high school, I went down to Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. And I loved Duke from the day I got there. The campus is incredible. It's a great place. It's one of those places where every time I go back there, as soon as I'm on campus, it just puts me in a great mood. I'm happy just to be on campus there. The town of Durham is awesome, and the Triangle area of North Carolina is awesome. The Triangle is the three cities of Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill make up the triangle. And there's a major college in each of those cities. Duke is in Durham, NC State is in Raleigh, and UNC Chapel Hill is in Chapel Hill. So nice weather down there, beautiful tall pine trees. Population's pretty young. They have amazing food in Durham and in the whole area. So my freshman year, got to school, played lacrosse there in the fall, played in the spring, and that year we won the school's first ever national championship. So that was a pretty incredible experience. I'll come back to that later. During the playoffs my freshman year, one of the seniors on our team was reading the book Lone Survivor. And after he read it, he started passing it around and said, "You guys have got to read this. This is an unbelievable story." So he gave it to me, told me to read it, and that's really what planted the bug in my head for the first time. In high school or when I came to college, I had no idea that I wanted to join the military, right? I didn't have something else in mind. I really just didn't think about it. As a kid, I always knew what I didn't want to do. I knew I didn't want to wear a suit or work in an office, be a businessman, so to speak. That had no appeal to me. But I didn't think far enough down the road to really have a plan. I was just focused on playing sports and enjoying school, and I hadn't thought that far yet. So when I read the book Lone Survivor, a light bulb went off in my head, right? Because it checked so many boxes for me. I was reading this story about these 4 guys out in the woods in Afghanistan, and I always, like I said, I had that evolutionarily focused mind, survival orientation. I loved being out in the woods. I loved being in nature. I loved doing really difficult things. I loved training hard. I loved being on close-knit teams with guys through athletics. And it checked, and I love traveling, right? So this checked so many boxes. I was instantly interested in it, and I thought, wow, this is it. So the next 2 years in college, my sophomore and junior years, I played football and lacrosse. So after my freshman year, we won the national championship. That summer, I went down and walked on, tried out for the football team. In high school, I committed to Duke to play lacrosse before the start of my junior year. Lacrosse recruiting was very early back then. And my football career really took off after that. So I knew in the back of my head that I wanted to have another shot at playing football at the next level if I had the opportunity to. But another small reason that I walked onto the team, and I'm sure nobody knew this at the time, but I'm sharing it with you guys, is I really didn't like having an off season in college. Well, I guess I shouldn't say I didn't like having an off season because I love training, right? But I didn't like the off season mentality that most of the teammates had. And this goes back to my mild obsession with training and with improvement, right? I didn't like working really hard Monday through Friday and then drinking all weekend. And I still didn't at this point in time. I barely drank ever, but most of my teammates did. There's a lot of pressure to go along with that, right? And not in a negative way. I love the guys on my team. They're as good of teammates as you could ask for. And the entire team would hang out together all the time on the weekends. But I really wanted nothing to do with that. I loved going out. I had no problem with that. But I was so narrowly focused on improvement and getting better and training. The idea of drinking was not appealing at all to me. I vividly remember going in Saturday mornings. I would go into the weight room, do extra workouts, or I would go into the weight room, get a weight vest, put it on, and go run the football stadium bleachers. And in the morning, on my way over to the weight room, I would get a text about something that I had probably been spoken about the day before and I knew was happening, right? They were organizing some sort of day drinking event, like a case race, which is basically a relay race where you divide into teams. You take a 30 case of beer and see who finishes the fastest, right? So they would send out text messages. Everybody's meeting here at 10 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, and I would pretend not to see them, right, and go do my workout. I would shower, go eat, and then at sometime in the afternoon, I would respond and say, sorry, I just got this. I was overworking out. Probably couldn't get away with that anymore with smartphones. I'm pretty sure back then I would bring my iPod to work out. Music was not integrated onto phones yet, so easier times. So yeah, I played football during the fall and played lacrosse in the spring. And Was busy, but loved it. Had a great time. During these 2 years was also when my interest for the military grew more and more. So after reading Lone Survivor, I immediately started doing research on all the different SOF communities. And I ended up being really drawn in by the difficulty of the SEAL training pipeline and the tight-knit brotherhood that it produced. Additionally, I had in my head that I wanted to be an officer, right? I'll talk more on that later. But in the SEALs, you could apply to go directly to BUDS from officer candidate school. And that was huge because in the other services, you would have to join the military, then hope you get your preferred MOS after going to officer candidate school. And then you'd have to hope after a few years in that MOS that you would get transferred to the SOF selection pipeline that you wanted to go to. With the Navy, you either got accepted or you got declined as a civilian and you had no commitment. So that was very appealing to me. Breaking the decision to my parents to join the military, become a SEAL, was actually very easy because in a sense, I never really did it, right? And what I mean by that is I let the idea sink in very gradually. And this wasn't a grand strategic plan of mine. It's just how things played out. Because I was in college, I knew after the end of my freshman year that I wanted to do this. So that gave me the next 3 years to research and learn more about it because I had no plans of dropping out of college to do this. So when I was home with my parents during those summers between different years of college, I would order military books off Amazon, SEAL books, all different military books, right? I ordered a SOG. I ordered this fixed blade knife. I think it was a SOG SEAL pup. And I would just carry this thing around. I would twiddle it. I went on YouTube and I learned how to throw knives, right? So I was out in the backyard and my parents would see me walking around learning to throw this thing and stick it in the trees. And eventually one day my mom came up to me and said, "Hey, Gregory, we noticed you've been ordering a lot of military things, these books and your knife, and that's not something that you have any interest in, is it?" And I basically said, "Yeah, Mom, it is. I'm very interested in it." But that was pretty much the end of the conversation because, again, I was in college. I still had several more years of college, so it wasn't like I was running off overnight to boot camp, right? It was not necessarily a pressing issue, and I think that was really the best thing I could have done because it just let the idea simmer, right? I'm sure my parents had conversations about it when I wasn't there between themselves. But it let the idea sink in over the long term. And they were definitely concerned about it, right? But I think any parent should be somewhat concerned when their child wants to join special operations. I don't think that any parent should flat outright deny you that opportunity, right? It's not a parent's place to carve out a path for their children in the world, right? You educate them, you provide them with all the tools to be successful that you've deemed important. But ultimately, you have to let them go their own way, right? Carve their own path. You can't choose what's interesting to them and what's meaningful to them. So yes, my parents were certainly concerned, but what I remember them telling me later on, I think after I joined the military, what was very comforting to them, for whatever reason, it was at some point, I guess I told them that they were probably pressing me on the issue. And I told them that this is absolutely what I felt like I was born to do. This is the most natural thing to me. I can't imagine doing anything else. That was really the thing. I couldn't imagine what else I would do except become a SEAL after I graduated. That was the only thing that I could envision myself doing. And me saying that I felt like it was what I was born to do and I couldn't imagine doing anything else was ultimately what really put them at ease. So maybe that would be useful for you. You know, maybe just if your parents are having a tough time with it, just share with them your conviction and your passion for it. Assuming that you've researched everything well enough, that you're educated on the military, you're well informed, and you're self-aware, then hope for the best. So now going into my senior year of college, I decided not to play football this year. And that was a really hard choice for me. But the last 2 years, the lacrosse team had lost in the Final Four both years, right? So we lost in the national semifinals. And I had this feeling like I had one foot in either camp, and I was kind of getting stretched thin, right? I was starting to do a split, and I wasn't fully committing myself to either football or lacrosse, because the football team would play spring ball in the spring and lift weights all spring semester. So those guys were getting bigger and stronger every year, and really all of the depth chart playing decisions were made in spring ball. And I would miss the entire spring, show up to camp, and try to earn a spot, right, which is a very tough thing to do. And in lacrosse, again, I didn't want to have regrets. I didn't want to – we'd won a national championship my freshman year. Then the 2 years I'd played football, we lost in the semifinals. And I didn't want to have the potential regret of not winning a national championship my senior year and thinking, man, I wasn't around. There's more that I could have done. All right, so it was a tough decision, but ultimately I wanted to have more of a leadership role, and I didn't want to have regrets. So ultimately, I decided not to play football my senior year. Now, that also ended up working out very well for applying to the SEALs, because it gave me time that fall semester to swim and to train to take my PSTs and to take all the necessary steps to get my application package together. So during the fall semester, my senior year, there was a career fair going on at Duke in the Student Center. I was just walking through the Student Center to get to one of my classes, and I see this career fair going on, all the different booths set up. And some of the services had booths. There was a Navy booth set up. So I stopped by just, kind of for kicks to say hello to the guy. And, he asked me if you have any interest, and I said, yeah, I want to be a SEAL, right? And he says, okay, you want to, and this guy, just being at Duke, I guess he just assumed that I wanted to be an officer, and so did I, because I didn't know what the hell the difference was. So he says, here, take my card. There's only one selection board per year, and you need to have your entire package submitted by January or February. So we need to get working on this thing now, right? So thank God I ran into this guy, because I was just thinking, yeah, I'm going to graduate college. I'm playing sports. I'll graduate. I'll finish playing lacrosse, and then I'll figure out how to apply to this thing. But again, they only have one selection board per year for the officer candidate program. So if I had missed that deadline, I would just have to wait another year after graduating to apply. So that fall semester, I start getting all of the paperwork together that I need to do. I go out and take my OAR, which is the officer equivalent of the ASVAB, or essentially the military IQ test for whatever service you're going into. I asked different people for my letters of recommendation. I used two coaches, a college coach, a high school coach, and then a SEAL that I had met who actually came and spoke to our football team at Duke, and I spoke to for a while afterwards, kept in touch with, and actually ended up going out to Coronado, meeting with him, doing a workout with him. He wrote me a letter of recommendation. And the other thing I remember having to do was write a 500-word personal statement on why I wanted to become a SEAL, and found that pretty easy to do and express, because it was something that I was so passionate about, right? And also, of course, in order to apply and to be competitive, I needed to take a PST, and not just take a PST, but be competitive in it. So again, thank God I ran into this Navy recruiter at the career fair that day, and also it was lucky that I was not playing football that fall, because I was in the off season for lacrosse, right? So we were training, lifting and running constantly, so that I was in very good shape. I wasn't getting beat up every day at practice, and I had more free time that I could go to the pool, swim, and do calisthenics. So I took 3 PSTs total. Each one was exactly 4 weeks apart, and I took them at the Cary, North Carolina YMCA, and my scores improved dramatically from each one across each 4-week period. I actually have my records right here, so I'll read them off to you so you can compare and see how much faster and stronger than me you are. First one was December 10th, 2012 in Cary. Swim was 9 minutes, 28 seconds, 68 push-ups, 84 sit-ups, 18 pull-ups, and a 9:15 run. Overall score was an 863. 4 weeks later, January 7th, 2013 in Cary. Swim was a 903. Did 81 push-ups, 92 sit-ups, 21 pull-ups, and ran a 9:32. Overall score was an 8:16. And then February 4th, 2013, I swam an 8:35, did 90 push-ups, 96 sit-ups, 24 pull-ups, and ran an 8:59 for an overall score of 724. That last test were the scores that I submitted my package with and ultimately got accepted with. And that goes to show one piece of advice that I have for taking the PST is don't let perfection be the enemy of good, right? Don't wait until you think you're going to score a perfect PST to go take one. Just go out. You only have to submit your best scores, right? It doesn't matter. You can take 30 PSTs. So go out and take your first one and see what it's like, because no matter how you're training, it's going to be slightly different. Whoever's administering the PST is going to have their own standards for what is a strict pull-up, what's a strict push-up, how much time you really get in between the events. It's supposed to be standardized, but it might fluctuate a little bit. You'll see the pool you're going to swim in. You'll see the other candidates you're going to do it with. You'll see the track that you're going to run on. So even if it doesn't matter, you don't have to be ready to go to buds. Just go out and take a PST, right, and see how you do, and then you'll have a better understanding for next time, and you'll go and use it as a training tool. So, got my PST scores, got my 3 letters of recommendation, I got my personal statement, and I think I submitted that package sometime in February. My last PST date was February 4th, so not important. I think mid-February I submitted this. The timeline is, I'm sure, slightly different now than it was 8 years ago. But the rough timeline was I submitted my package in February. Then in May, it was during the playoffs of lacrosse, I remember I got a phone call for a phone interview. Once you pass the phone interview, then you selected either June, July, or August to fly out to Coronado and go take a PST and have an interview with a panel of SEALs and a selection committee out there. Today they have what's called SOAS, S-O-A-S, I think SEAL Officer Assessment and Selection. And that's a similar process where you put your package in. There's only one board a year. Similar timeline. You go out in either June, July, or August. But it's instead of, say, 3 days in Coronado, you spend 2 weeks out there. And you do the first week, you do a week of essentially a first phase of buds of all these different physical evolutions just with other officer candidates. And then the second week, they do some classroom things to teach you, and you do a number of interviews. So it's definitely a upgraded, more in-depth process they have now. And both then and now, probably more so now, it's a very, very competitive process. It is not easy to get an OCS SEAL billet. But continuing with the timeline, I went out in July. I believe it was either September or October when I finally got word that I had been accepted. And that was just a phone call one day saying that I had been accepted. There was no official notification yet. And I also it was another month or two. It was probably not until late November when I actually got orders of when I was going to leave for OCS, when I had my ship date. So the ship date I was given was February 1st of the following year. So again, that's almost when I actually left to begin OCS is approximately 1 year from when I submitted my package. So if you were applying to this officer board and you didn't get accepted, if you wanted to try again, then that's minimum 1 more year before you're leaving again. So it's a very lengthy process and something that you have to consider if you're considering going the officer route. And now that I brought myself to that subject, I'll try to discuss briefly the officer versus enlisted route, because this isn't something that I knew anything about at all before joining the military. Right? I didn't come from a military family. I didn't have friends that were SEALs or friends that were in the military. I was just figuring this out on my own. And so when I was on Wikipedia in college reading about the military and special operations, I had really no understanding of the role of an officer SEAL versus an enlisted SEAL. To me at the time, it seemed like a no-brainer, right? I heard that officers got paid slightly more. I heard they were expected to be leaders, and slightly more was demanded of them when going through buds. and it was harder to be selected to be an officer. So when I was in college, it seemed like a no-brainer. It was like, yeah, this is tougher. This is kind of like being a captain on the team. Sure, I'll go out for that, and if I can get selected, I'll do it. Now, that is an incredibly ignorant view of officers and enlisted in the military, but that's what I had at the time. And do I regret my decision? I don't know, is the honest answer. I don't know. For those of you who are like I was and are unfamiliar with the different roles and responsibilities, enlisted SEALs are probably more what you think of when you think of a traditional Navy SEAL. Enlisted SEALs are the guys who are going to be snipers, they're going to be breachers, they're going to be medics, they're going to be your lead navigators and recce team members. The large majority of the cool guy positions and skill sets that you think of are all going to be filled by enlisted guys. People say that officers are responsible for the up and out, and enlisted are responsible for the down and in a tactical situation. And what that means is where your attention is focused during an operation, right? So an officer is going to be responsible up and out, meaning broad blue force picture, right? Where are all of our forces positioned? Am I communicating that with higher ups? What are our assets doing? What assets do we have overhead, meaning ISR, fires platforms, medevac, communicating with host nation, deconflicting with other forces in the area. These are all concerns that an officer is going to have during an operation. An officer is never going to place a charge on a door. An officer is almost never going to be taking a sniper shot. And an officer is certainly not going to be the first one in a doorway into a house. In fact, on most operations, if an officer is shooting his gun, something has probably gone terribly wrong. On most operations, that's certainly not to say that it doesn't happen, because it definitely does. I think my vision of what an officer did before joining the Navy is probably exactly what senior enlisted leaders do in a SEAL platoon, right? My vision of leadership would be making tactical calls in the field, right? We're going to flank left. We're going to squad one on me. We're going to go frag this barricaded shooter. Something like that in the tactical realm, right? I was not thinking of leadership as communicating up and out back to higher headquarters and to the different assets that are flying over you. And I don't mean to demean that in any way. It's unbelievably important. I just want everyone to have a clear picture of roles and responsibilities of officers and enlisted, because I certainly did not going in. Now, there are tons of perks and huge responsibilities that come with being an officer that are great. If you're a natural leader, if you're really interested in leadership, then that may be the route for you. You definitely have the ability to make a big impact on your platoon, on your command, and if you stay in long enough, on the Navy, on the military in general. As an officer, you have that power in the large military, where you're able to be much more influential and weigh in on decisions. But if you're sitting at home thinking, all I wanted to do my whole life is be a sniper, all I wanted to do is be a machine gunner and hump the 60, be a 50 cal gunner, then being an officer is probably not for you. And I also want to make it perfectly clear, one is not better than the other, right? In my view, in college, I was just thinking, officer is more difficult. It's better if you can do that. That's not the case at all. They're just different roles, and your responsibility is going to be different depending on which path you take. So again, if I could go back and do it all over again, which would I choose? I really don't know. I think I would have been happier enlisting, for sure. I think if I'd enlisted, I probably would have done 20 years active duty in the Navy. It definitely would have been much more enjoyable, and the day-to-day skill sets is more what I was looking for going into the Navy. But just doing what you enjoy doing is not always what's best for you, right? So what I am grateful for, it was not always pleasant in the moment, like anything worth learning, but being an officer put me in many situations that pushed me far outside of my comfort zone, right? And I grew a lot more as an officer than I would have had I been enlisted. So that's really my take on it. I think I absolutely would have enjoyed being enlisted more. I would have enjoyed the job. I would have been happier. But I do think I have grown a lot and am a much better person because of the difficult things I had to do as an officer and the responsibility I had to take on. Who knows? Maybe that's me just trying to rationalize it in hindsight, right? Psychologically, but whatever. I'll put a positive spin on anything. I'm sticking to my story. So that was my OCS application timeline. During that timeline, during my spring semester of my senior year of college, lacrosse team won a national championship again, which is such a cool experience. And during my first talk with Zach, he asked about that, about the culture on the team and about playing on tight-knit, high-performing teams like that. And I'll briefly mention two things about winning a national championship that I think are relevant. The first is about team culture and about relationships. So when you're in the playoffs, it's the most fun time of the year by a mile because school is done, right? You have no more classes. All the rest of the kids go home. So it's just the teams that are in the playoffs are still on campus. You actually get kicked out of, the kids who are living on campus get kicked out of their dorms. They all move in with the upperclassmen who rent houses out in town. So you have 15, 20 guys packed into a house living together. And all you have to do, it's like you're a professional athlete. All you have to do is play lacrosse. All right, we eat breakfast as a team together. We watch film. We shoot. We eat lunch. We have practice in the afternoon. Then we'll eat dinner together. We'll watch a movie. We'll do whatever. So you're just with the guys all day long, and it's win or go home in the playoffs, right? So kind of the rallying cry, the mantra every week is, if you win a game, it's one more week with the boys. And that's what it's all about. It's about being able to spend more time with each other because as soon as you lose a game, then the season's over, everybody's going home, and that's it. So every week that we win, it's another week with the boys. And what I will always remember is after winning a national championship, the bittersweet feeling that comes with it. Because don't get me wrong, it is absolutely the best way to end the season. It is the best possible way to go out. But no matter what, the season is over, right? So as elated as you are that you just won the national championship, at the same time, you realize that this is the last time this team is ever going to play together again, and there's nobody else left to play. So guys would be in the locker room after winning a national championship, crying their eyes out, like bawling because the season was over and this team was over and they were never going to play together again, right? The seniors were moving on, they were graduating, and that was it. So I think that that's a really cool memory because talk about a litmus test for if you're on a good team or not, if you have a good culture or not. When you achieve the highest goal you could possibly achieve, right, and guys are crying because their team is getting broken up and they don't have any more time to spend with each other and they're not going to be able to play together anymore. That's what a great team is to me. Second takeaway from winning a national championship, and many of you might already know this, and it's something that even when we learn it, we forget it frequently, and I constantly have to remind myself of it. You've all heard the old cliche, it's the journey, not the destination. And I think most people will attest to that, in their own personal experience, that that's true. For me, winning a national championship was the single best example that I've had of this. Because here's this goal that you've been working to for seemingly forever. And then the disappointment of the season ending and the team dissolving outweighs the joy of the championship. Right? Again, I certainly prefer winning to losing, but for how long can you sit there and bask in the glory of accomplishment? Right? After about 48 hours, I felt that void again of lacking a goal to work towards, and it was time to move on. It was time to set a new, loftier target and throw myself towards that, right? It was time to start preparing for buds. It was time to try to become a Navy SEAL. The dream that you're somehow going to arrive somewhere, that once you get that next house, once you get that job, once you make this amount of money, once you become a team guy, then you're going to be good, then you're going to be happy. It's a myth. I promise you it's a myth. And I'm not preaching here because I'm going to forget this 1,000 times, and I have the goals that I want now, and I think those are going to make me happy. But I know that, look, that the dream of, you win the lottery, you got $100 million and you kick your feet up in a hammock on a beach drinking pina coladas and you're just happy doing that, you're not going to be happy, right? You're not going to be happy because we need, as human beings, psychologically, we need a goal to work towards. It's rewarding to us to make progress towards goals that we set. Just as human beings, we're not designed to sit in stasis, right? And we have some deep biological mechanism ingrained with us, really, to work to improve our lives. And I think that's where that comes from. It's a journey, not the destination. We find joy from improvement from our current situation. There's never a place of arrival that will give you happiness into the future, right? It's 2021. I'm not in a good mood all day, every day, because I won a national championship in 2013. I promise you, I'm not. I'm not in a good mood all day, every day, because I passed buds and became a Navy SEAL. Right? Those were long-term goals that I wanted very badly, but I achieved them, and now I need new ones, or else, wither away at your own risk. So, enough of that tangent. Get back to the military. So after lacrosse was over, the national championship game is always Memorial Day weekend. That's the end of May, so I had really just over a month to train for my SEAL officer selection interview panel, which was out in Coronado. Motivation-wise, training then was very easy, right? Because I had a quick turnaround. As soon as I finished lacrosse, I had less than 2 months before my next test, and that was the kind of gatekeeping test to decide if I would get selected as an officer to go to BUD/S or not. And I've got to say, I actually failed in preparing for this. Maybe not in training in the weeks leading up, but at least preparation in the days before. Because what happened was I was doing well in the PST, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, swim, no problem. And I got to the run, and after about the first half mile, my hamstring started cramping badly, to the point where it wasn't a twinge, it was cramping where I really could not run with it. I was hopping. I was essentially hopping on one leg. And I remember thoughts running through my head while I was running that I wasn't going to make the bare minimum standard, which is a 10:30. And a 10:30 is not a competitive time, but that is, if you don't run at least a 10:30, you fail the PST. So in my head, I'm thinking, if I fail this, I'm not even going to be eligible. So I was essentially hopping the majority of the time as fast as I could to try to finish this thing in less than 10 minutes and 30 seconds. And I did end up doing that. I don't know what my time was, but it was definitely over 10 minutes. We'll say it was 10:25. It was pretty close. And I had my interview later that day with a panel of a bunch of SEALs, and they asked me, what did you think of your PST today? And I just told them, I have no idea what happened. I played sports all my life. I thought I had hydrated and prepared for this very well. And maybe it was nerves, but, I started cramping, and that's it. And obviously it ended up working out. I guess they were understanding that, things happen and we're all human, but certainly not a strategy that I would recommend going into a PST. Anyway, I finished that test in July, go back home, and this was the only, after doing my selection test out in Coronado, was the one time where it was difficult motivation-wise to train with serious intensity. And the reason that is I didn't know if I was accepted yet, and I certainly didn't have a ship date, right? So this was the first time that I didn't have a goal to work towards, because my future was completely uncertain. I didn't even have a date when I was going to hear back. But eventually in September, October timeframe, I got word that I was accepted, and I started training hard again from then on. Now, when you're training for BUD/S, regardless of what program you're doing, there's probably going to be 4 main types of exercise that you're doing: running, swimming, calisthenics, and weightlifting. And I want to be clear that everyone should not follow the same program to train for buds, at least not initially. And what I mean by that is there's an endpoint you should strive to work towards. For example, just this morning I put the finishing touches on a buds prep program that's going to be available on Operators Association. And it's very similar to what I did before going to buds. And if you can do this program, you are physically capable of passing buds. It is a no joke. It is a tough program. All right, there's a lot of volume. There's a lot of running, a lot of swimming, a lot of calisthenics. If you can keep up with that, you can pass buds physically, period. But what I was saying about not everyone should train for the same program, look, I think that program is probably good for every single candidate before going to buds. But this is not a program that you're going to do if you've been sitting on the couch for a while. This is not a program you're going to do if you've been working out 2 or 3 days a week for a while. You should not start this program unless you are already significantly physically fit. So initially, before you're at the stage where you can start a buds prep program like this, you need to identify your background and see where your strengths and where your weaknesses are. For me, I was an athlete. I was strong, I was fast and explosive. And when I say fast, I mean very fast sprinting. I was not an endurance athlete. I was not an endurance runner, and I was definitely not a swimmer. So when I was training, I did not need to crush the weight room. I needed to run long distance, I needed to swim, and I needed to do calisthenics because those were things that I didn't do regularly. And you have to be well-rounded going to buds. You'll hear people say buds is a running man's game, and that is 100% true. If you cannot run, you cannot go to buds, period. Do not waste your time. But you can't just be a runner because that's why they invented log PT. And that's why they invented boats on heads. So there's something for everyone at buds. You have to be able to run. You have to be able to swim. You have to be strong. And if not, if you're significantly weak in any of those areas, then it's going to be a big problem and you will get exposed there. So you have to make sure you have a well-rounded training program going into buds. I'm not going to get in-depth on my training program now because, number one, I just finished this buds prep program that you can take a look at online. And two, after the 6-part series as the director of athletics, all of my podcasts are going to be about training, physical, mental performance. So whatever questions that you have regarding training specifics, we can go into in much more depth at a later date. One thing I will put out now, if you're training for buds, 3 books I would highly recommend. Right? I think you should be educating yourself as much as you possibly can on buds, on the whole process. But 3 must-read books, in my opinion. Number 1, Breaking Buds. This breaks down every evolution in buds, tells you exactly what to expect in all the phases, and it's knowledge is power at buds. So highly recommend that. Number 2 is called Gates of Fire, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the movie 300 about the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae. This is a book about that. The author is Stephen Pressfield, and if the warrior profession is for you, then you will love this book. And number 3 is Fearless by Eric Blem. There's a lot of SEAL books out there. We kind of get a bad rap for that, but this is definitely the best SEAL book in my opinion, and I think you should read it. Spoiler alert, it's about the life and death of just a truly incredible human being. And along with Gates of Fire, I think both of those books will keep you fired up while you're training to go to buds. So fast forward to the end of training. It's February 2014, and I report to Officer Candidate School, which is up in Newport, Rhode Island. I'm not going to cover OCS in detail because I think the large majority of the guys on this platform are E-Dogs, and I don't need to bore you with the specifics of Officer Candidate School that you're not going to experience. If there are officers in here that want to hear more about it, I'd be happy to give you tons of details at a later date. But I will give you a couple lessons from Officer Candidate School that I think are just as applicable to boot camp. Number 1 regards MEPS and medical. I get a lot of questions from potential soft candidates that reach out to me and they ask about disclosing certain things on their medical record. And I am giving you the straight answer right here, right now. I don't care if you have family in the military. If you heard from your recruiter, if you hear something different, do not listen to them. Here it is. If you had any previous injury or surgery, etc., medical condition, the Navy cannot look up your medical records. If you do not disclose something, they will not know about it. Now, with that being said, you have to be smart about this. I'm going to tell you a story about somebody that I went to OCS with. This is another SEAL candidate. He was selected through the SOAS selection just like I was. We were in the same OCS class, and he was supposed to go to BUD/S afterwards. He did not disclose that he had a back surgery. Now, when he was at medical at OCS, because MEPS isn't the only medical, when you're at OCS or at boot camp, you're going to go to plenty of medical appointments. He was in the doctor's office, and he had a huge several-inch scar next to his spine. Right? So the doctor looked at it and said, "What is this?" And he told him that he had this surgery, which the doctor realized was not disclosed on any of his medical records. It was a disqualifying procedure, and I think just the fact that he lied about it made it that much worse, and he was gone. Right? That week, he was out of my OCS class. He was out of the Navy. He certainly is not a SEAL, right? The guy was out of the Navy that first week. So, if you're going to not disclose something, make sure it's not something that's easily visible or revealable. On the other hand, I had a heart surgery, had 2 heart surgeries actually when I was around 14, 15, had one that failed and then had a second one that was successful. I had a condition called tachycardia, supraventricular tachycardia, or SVT. Basically meant at random times my heart would start racing uncontrollably. So I went and I had a procedure to fix that, and I never had any issues with that, right? Playing sports for all throughout high school and throughout college at a very high level, training for the Navy. Completely good to go, right? Did not affect me whatsoever. So I did not disclose that at MEPS, at medical. Completely fine, right? Medical information, medical records are very private, personal information, and no one can look up your past medical records without your permission. The only thing that the Navy is going to know about your medical past is what you disclose to them. Now, again, I'm not saying don't disclose anything. There are some things that are going to be obvious that they're going to be able to find out. So if you don't disclose them, you could get yourself in hot water. But if it's a situation like mine where it's something that you know does not affect you, you know you're completely safe, and there's no way that the Navy's going to be able to see or discover it, then by all means, do not put it down. So that's lesson number 1 from OCS. My buddy didn't disclose his surgery, had a several-inch long, very obvious scar from it. Doctor said, "What is that?" It's from a surgery, and he left the Navy, never became a SEAL. So don't do that. Lesson number 2, very applicable to boot camp. You are going to get out of shape in OCS or in boot camp. Now, you should try your damnedest to stay in shape whenever you have free time, cranking out push-ups, sit-ups, dips in your room, whatever. But, look, it's easy to say that here on a podcast when you're not in there. If you're getting 3 hours of sleep, you're probably not going to be working out very hard. But be mentally prepared for that going in, right? It's difficult when you're preparing for BUD/S and you've been training for at least 6 months before this, probably a lot longer than that, to get ready to go to BUD/S. You're in best shape of your life, and then you leave for OCS, you leave for boot camp, and you're immediately not able to PT, to work out the way that you want to. You're not getting very much sleep. You're eating shitty food. So you're not going to maintain the same level of fitness that you came in with. You're going to wither away a bit, and your fitness is going to decline. Just know that's going to happen, and be mentally prepared for it so it doesn't crush you mentally when it does happen. Just remember that everyone that's gone to BUD/S before you has done the same path. You're going to be fine. You're going to get your fitness back. If you're enlisted going to boot camp, you're going to go to BUD/S prep afterwards, and all they're going to do is have you on a 24/7 schedule to get you physically prepared for BUD/S, so don't worry about it. And my last broad scope piece of advice for both OCS and boot camp is just keep your head down and get through it. Both of these processes are incredibly lame, right? It's going to be very disheartening seeing the I hate to say this, but the quality of some of the people around you, the mental weakness and how easily people are brainwashed, for lack of a better term. It's disheartening for sure. But find the core group of guys that are like-minded, that share the same dedication to training, that share the same values, are mentally tough, and are not cowering in fear from the boot camp instructors and turning on each other and ratting out other students for sneaking peanut butter packets out of the chow hall. And I don't even want to go down this rabbit hole. It's a dark time, but the point is you have an end goal, right? You did not join the Navy to go to OCS. You did not join the Navy to go to boot camp. It's a necessary step along the way on the path to get to BUD/S and to become a SEAL. So no matter how stupid, how immature, how disheartening things may seem, just keep the big picture in mind, keep your head down, and get through it. I met two of my best friends in the world at OCS, so hopefully you find someone else there that can keep you sane amongst all the BS. So that does it for the first episode. I know I didn't give you really any detail on the specifics of OCS. Again, that's largely because of the e-dog population on the site, and I just tried to provide the applicable lessons that cover both OCS and boot camp. I think I also just didn't like OCS very much, so try not to talk about those times unless we absolutely have to. But if you guys do want to hear more specifics about that, please leave me some feedback, and I can absolutely deep dive into, day 1 through week 12, day 7 of OCS, whenever you want. Next time on episode 2, we're going to go from graduation from OCS to checking into BUD/S, PTRR, basic orientation, and the first 3 weeks of first phase. So we're going to talk about first phase of BUD/S and stop right before we get to Hell Week. If you're training to go to BUD/S and there's certain aspects of first phase that you want to hear about, please comment on this podcast so I know what to include on the next one. Boys, I'm fired up to be on board as the director of athletics. Keep training, stay hard.